It's a slow improvement. What's this bishop doing? What's this knight doing? Pretty much nothing, but you've got all the time in the world. Why? An old TV show taught us that space is the final frontier. Well, it's not quite the final ChessKid King lesson, but it is an important topic. Here, Anatoly Karpov is white, former world champion and then master at space travel. You can usually just look at the board and determine who has more space. White clearly does. I guess you could count how many squares you aim at on the other side of the board, but it's not usually necessary. Now, black's pieces are all in the back two rows, and black tried to improve one after bishop to g5, but after Karpov saved his rook, look at this. He gains even more space with pawn to f4, and the bishop has to run away. One thing about when you have more space, you can usually take your time improving your pieces as long as you don't allow your opponent to create any open files or counterplay. And if you look at pretty much any black pawn advance, none of them are good, so Karpov takes his time moving his pieces to slightly better positions. Okay, now a bishop trade is offered, but that's actually black's only good piece, that bishop. In general, if you've got more space, you want to avoid trades. The more pieces you keep on the board, the more your opponent's pieces will be basically stepping on top of each other, getting in each other's way. Okay, now watch how black's pieces are just basically rummaging around the board while Karpov slowly improves his position. Now, black tried to gain some space with a5, but that weakens the b5 square. That turns out to be really, really important because Karpov heads right for b5. So notice if you're the person defending with less space, you often just want to do nothing. That's right. Any pawn move you make is a weakness, and in this case, the b5 square is weakened. In fact, the game is already pretty much lost because that d6 pawn, yeah, he's weaker than any other pawn on the chessboard, and if you give a grandmaster an extra pawn, that's usually game over. I'm going to fly through some of the remaining moves. Notice how white is not in a hurry to capture this pawn, because then any knight move would be a pin on the knight. So again, speed is not important when you have more space. We can pick off that pawn whenever we want to. So Karpov keeps piling up on it, slowly reroutes his pieces. None of these moves are terribly important, and Karpov finally waits until his opponent makes another weakening pawn move. And after f5, now Karpov has even more space on the king's side. Why is that important? Well, we're about to find out. Look at this. He just loves him some extra space. All the pawns are coming forward. He even improves his king. Why? Well, because the h-file is about to open up. A lot of little itty-bitty moves here by Karpov. We're not even worried about the d6 pawn. We can win that guy later. And finally, black gets so frustrated he plays the move d5, and after captures, we have ourselves a protected passed pawn. You might think that was the winning element, but no, watch what Karpov does. He opens up the h-file after all, and after takes, knight goes back, pawn up to d6. Wow, that pawn is pretty scary. Rook up to c5. Do we save our knight? No. We're a world champion. We're going to play this cute little idea, queen h2. Now, did we just lose a knight for nothing? Forced mate. Queen takes, we double up our rooks, and then after the king thinks he has an escape square, rook h8, black resigns, because if the king goes to f7, we have a very neat pawn mate, pawn to g6. Wouldn't that be sweet? Okay, we went through that rather quickly, but what I wanted to show you is how you can use space on even both sides of the board. Let's look at our next example. And guess who's white? Yeah, it's Karpov again. Hello. And again, white has much more space. It's a slow improvement. What's this bishop doing? What's this knight doing? Pretty much nothing, but you've got all the time in the world. Why? Because black's pieces are doing even less. They really have almost no squares to move to. So Karpov begins with this little itty bitty move, bishop to c2. Karpov was kind of a little guy, but he was the master of little moves. Okay, bishop to f7. Black is doing the right thing, just kind of holding his ground, wasting time. And after this, the knights are rummaging around the board. Here comes the bishop to an open diagonal. And now, what did I tell you? When you have nothing to do, don't move pawns. Why? Because you weaken squares. Black played h6. Now you may have thought that was fortifying his position, but every pawn moves a weakness, and this pawn just weakened the g6 square. That ends up being important in just 1 second. Karpov exchanges his worst bishop, and eventually those bishops get traded. Karpov then uses the h5 square. Told you it would take a little bit of time. And the queen hops in. And then queen g6, and suddenly black does not want to take the queen, because after pawn takes, then both knights can use the f5 square, and if you remember back to our pawn structure position, the f6 pawn would actually be a backward pawn. So black tries to hold on with a little king move, and after knight h5, That's it. That's all. Black decided to resign. Of course, Black could stop the mate threat by guarding that bishop with the queen, but then the other knight would hop into the g4 square, this pawn would be triple attacked, this pawn would be double attacked, and any trade of the queens would lead to devastation on the f-file. All of these little itty-bitty moves gave just enough weaknesses for the master, Karpov, to invade. Let's look at another example. In another game played between two world champions, we had Lasker Capablanca. Clearly, White's pieces are having much more fun than Black's in this position, and again, we have our weak backward pawn on the d-file. We want to focus on one key move in this position. If you've got more space, you want to prevent your opponent from gathering some space of his own. Often that means stopping his pawns from moving. Now in this position, what move does Black really want to make? Well, I think at some point Black might think about playing the move c5 or even a5, gaining some space for the pieces. After all, if Black could play a5 and b4, maybe bishop a6, somehow his pieces are gaining some life. I could even see c5 happening maybe one day. Probably not when the knight can go to the square d5, but maybe one day. So what does Lasker do? He stops every single pawn move on the queen side with one magical touch, b4. And guess what? Those black pawns aren't going anywhere. The A pawn can't move, the B pawn can't move, the C pawn can't move. All of those squares are either blocked or guarded, and in short, there is nothing for Black to do in this position. I do just want to show you a couple more moves to again show you how slowly you can play with the space advantage. A3, King F2, G4, and then H4, gaining even more space. White eventually went on to win this game. No surprise there. More space usually equals the full point. One quick final example to show you. Back before chess computers were so awesome, they actually were kind of stupid a long time ago. In this position, White clearly has more space to computers Black, but Black wants to be able to play g5 and get his queen out. So what does the human grandmaster do? Starts with h4, preventing the g5 move, and this queen, yeah, she's a pretty sad sack. She's not going anywhere for a long time. And then look what White does here. You're really going to enjoy this. White plays a4, then White plays c4, and then White plays e4. That's right, it's the Great Wall of China on the 4th rank. And oh well, this is just the prettiest space gaining position of all time. I don't even have to show you the rest of the game. None of Black's pieces are doing anything. The Black queen is doing less than nothing. The human went on to beat the computer, but of course computers had the last laugh. Computers can now crush the strongest humans in chess. But from what we saw today, more space equals happier pieces, and happier pieces means happier chess kids.